Hello, I'm Leo K, and this was a requested video on how to climb and move effectively in Assassin's Creed 1, 2, Brotherhood, and Revelations. This is broken up into two main elements, button discipline and world processing. They correspond to the physical execution and mental execution of playing the game respectively. We're also going to cover a few advanced tactics or useful mindsets. But in terms of physical execution, we have buttons. We have high profile, legs, and empty hand. I'm going to be referring to buttons like this by their in-game function. This type of notation makes my explanation universal and usable by everyone, no matter what system you play on. In the mental aspect, we've got parkour starters, scouting for back ejects and side ejects, and finally looking for ledges that we can grab in midair. This all opens the aerial gameplay significantly, and it'll change your movement for the better. Movement in classic Assassin's Creed games can be aggravating sometimes because of their unique control scheme and the way your character sometimes does things you didn't want them to do. You can actually fix most of that very easily just by learning what you're doing wrong and playing more consciously. It starts with button discipline, because that's the easiest thing to see a direct impact from. Button discipline is the concept that you press the buttons you need to press while not pressing the buttons you don't need to press. This may sound silly and obvious, but we're starting at the beginning because it's fundamental. Understand that most players who struggle with AC movement are in reality struggling with this exact concept. So why is absent-minded button use a problem? Because Assassin's Creed, especially in the older games, is very precise. This means you also have to be very precise. To its detractors, this might sound a bit weird, but if you press a button or do an action that you don't actually intend to do, whether you realize your mistake or not, this will translate into an Assassin's Creed game on screen immediately. This happens because of how cancelable the early AC games are. What this means is your character will often break off from their current action to instantly animation cancel into the action that you just punched in. We'll start simple. Movement in Assassin's Creed is broken up into two major states, low profile and high profile. Low profile is the default state your assassin is in whenever you're not holding the high profile button. In this state you will merely walk, and all of your action buttons will perform more subtle actions that will not get you detected. Existing in this state might seem a bit boring, but it is very, very useful because it acts as a safe movement mode that prevents the assassin from doing anything too crazy. It makes gameplay easier to control. So don't be afraid to exist in low profile. It'll also let you take in the world more, which comes into play later, and it'll give you finer control over how far or how close you want to be to a guard or a target. High profile, meanwhile, makes the assassin move faster, and action buttons you press in this state will do more chaotic, loud, flashy, and noticeable actions attached to those buttons. Instead of assassinating quietly, you assassinate brutally, but you have more range. Instead of walking a little faster, you break out into a wild run. Instead of gently parting a crowd for yourself to move through, you rudely shove them out of your way. Moving in high profile makes you jog faster than walking, even if you're not pressing any other button along with it. All in all, high profile is a really attractive way to move around because no one likes to just walk slowly when their objective is on the other side of a city. But you should know that just like beginners in racing games often forget to brake in order to turn corners, we assassins sometimes forget to let go of high profile whenever we are cornering or moving close to objects and people. This leads to annoying situations that players complain about, like running up walls you don't want to run up, accidentally jumping off a rooftop when you didn't mean to, or your assassin refusing to listen to what you tell them. Most of the time the real problem is actually the opposite. They're not doing whatever they want, they're doing exactly what your buttons told them to. Your own inputs just aren't as clean as they should be, and the easiest way to clean up your inputs is to remember to let go of high profile to avoid those situations. Some good examples would be when your character approaches sensitive points in the world, like civilians, edges, walls, and parkour objects that you want to avoid acting on. The legs button in high profile does two different things. First, it causes you to sprint, which represents your fastest possible movement speed, but also your hardest to control. If you move into other characters in the world while sprinting, you'll take a balance hit. If you quickly take two balance hits in a row, you will tumble to the ground. Avoid this by releasing sprint before you smack into a civilian or a crowded group. Second, sprinting causes the assassin to auto-move over chains of environmental obstacles using their parkour techniques. This is Assassin's Creed's most famous mechanic, of course. What this means is if you point at a wall while sprinting, you will auto move up that wall. If you point at a beam or a pole while sprinting, you will auto move over those elements because that's what you're telling the assassin to do. I'm being Captain Obvious and everyone already knows this, but what we forget is we always have to be careful not to tell them to do those things by accident. And again, that's where button discipline comes into play. We know that this combo causes us to parkour through objects, so if we want to avoid doing it by accident, we can just go ahead and rip out one of the buttons from our inputs completely. Instead of trying to be hyper accurate on the stick or the keyboard, we'll still be safe from unwanted jumping around if we remove one of those buttons. Then, if you see an object that you do want to move through, just go back to holding both buttons again. A high profile action is defined by two buttons being held at the same time, the high profile button and the action button that's being used with it. So, you can release any one of those to prevent a movement disaster. Let's do an actual example. Take Sprint, the most common high-profile action and what you'll be using for a lot of your playtime. Sprint is triggered by the combo of high profile and legs. Releasing high profile will cause you to only be holding legs, and releasing legs will cause you to only be holding high profile. Because one of the two buttons has been removed, you are no longer sprinting. You're either going to be fast walking or running. Neither a fast walk nor a run can screw you over the same way that a sprint and parkour will. Remember this. To keep things simple in your head, just release high profile every time. When you're starting out, this will let you get used to the concept as you learn this mindset, dropping down in speed a very noticeable amount, so it'll be easier for you to understand what's happening on the screen. Later, when you get better at processing this mentally, you can start choosing to release legs to keep running, or release high profile to fast walk. This isn't 100% foolproof, but as a rule of thumb, releasing legs will let you move optimally around walls, and releasing high profile will let you move optimally around civilians. Again though, to start things off, just let go of high profile. Get into this habit. Be conscious of it. When you're playing, start actually hunting for opportunities to use this in your normal gameplay, and test it out a lot. You'll get the hang of it a lot faster than you think. Finally, let's cover the empty hand button. You might be wondering how a simple button like this is more intense or challenging to learn using than what I just talked about, but that's because the consequences for failing with this button can sometimes be desyncing. Stakes that high add mental pressure, and mental pressure makes all gameplay more difficult by its very nature. Empty hand in low profile causes you to gently part a crowd, so you can smoothly move through it without making a scene. This is useful for moving through people when you're not detected. Empty hand in high profile while moving causes you to shove people out of the way. This is useful for moving through people when you already are detected or when you're chasing someone and don't care about enemy attention. Both of these seem underwhelming for climbing and aerial movement, so why did I mention empty hand at all? Because it's the only button in the game that has a unique action attached to it whenever you're airborne. Whenever you're falling through the air, holding down empty hand, whether it's circle, B, or shift, will make the assassin reach out with their hand, and you control what direction they reach in around you by using your left stick or movement keys. There's one major mindset you will always remember about this button as it relates to movement. If you're airborne for any reason, you will have your finger over this, ready to press it. If you get hit by a rock off a building, you get ready to hold empty hand. If you're jumping from one rooftop to another, you'll get ready to hold empty hand. If you've just pressed empty hand in order to drop down from a ledge on a wall, you get ready to hold empty hand. Anytime the assassin is in midair, this is the only action you have direct control over anymore, which means it is the action you need to be prepared to control at any time. Think about it this way. When you're falling, you can't move in any direction except, your jump arc. You can't attack or kill anyone until you land. You don't have enough time to trigger eagle vision, and pressing legs doesn't do anything because your feet aren't touching anything. So the only button that does anything is empty hand. If you surrender controlling the only button that does anything during a point in a game, you are effectively surrendering your entire control over your character. You want to always be in control. Getting ready to grab a ledge with empty hand is how you stay in control while airborne, and refusing to do it surrenders your control completely. The more you remember to do this, the better you'll get. In the fighting game community, players just discovering the genre often become obsessed with learning long and difficult combos, believing that that's what fighting game prowess is all about. That's the secret sauce. I'll learn a huge combo and land it, and the enemy will take 40% damage and I will be good at fighting games. They'll then take this labbed out combo online or to a local, play against an opponent who's doing much simpler things, and still lose. Why? Because learning inputs is worthless to you if you never have the chance to actually use them. Assassin's Creed works like this too. You can learn what your buttons do all day long, but if you don't also know the right situations to look for in order to use them, that's not gonna help. There are certain scenarios you need to start actively looking for and hunting for, in addition to the generic parkour paths your eyes will start to naturally snap to as you increase playtime in Assassin's Creed. You ever see things next to walls or on the streets that look like big chunky stairs? Usually they have a white sheet on them, but not always. Those are parkour starters. They're specifically designed in a way that when you do parkour over them and continue following the pathing they suggest, you'll climb the building they're set next to much quicker. The reason for this is simple, and it's that horizontal movement in Assassin's Creed is usually faster than vertical movement. This has a basis in the real world. It's easier to run forward and side to side than it is to fight gravity and struggle your way up a wall. This defines how we're supposed to climb in Assassin's Creed as well. Even when we want to go up, we should still be going up by going sideways. This principle is what a lot of high-skill climbing gameplay is built on, so that's one thing that a lot of players don't do. Use parkour starters, folks, and use ladders too while we're here. They may seem boring or like the game is giving you the answer, but effective movement isn't about always striking out on your own path, even if it's slow and inefficient. Effective movement is about traversing the world in a way that gives you the greatest speed, and parkour starters and ladders are a fantastic way to achieve that. The freebies end here, however. To keep moving quickly in most situations where you won't see a starter, you won't see a ladder, when the game just doesn't give you the answer, we have to learn how to eject. This could have gone in the button section, and maybe it should have, but it's important we talk about it here because it embeds more smoothly into the idea of identifying movement opportunities. Wall-Ejects separate a novice from an intermediate assassin, just like how proficiency with catch ledge separates an intermediate from a master. Whenever the assassin's feet are on a wall, whether they're running up it or their feet are planted against it while hanging, you can hold high profile and tap legs to do a wall eject. Doing this without directional input will cause you to back eject, propelling yourself away from the wall backwards, and you'll land on or grab anything behind you. This move gains height. Doing it with left or right directional input will side eject to the left or right of the obstacle. You'll land on or grab anything to the side that you ejected to. This move also gains height. Using both eject types together to their fullest is how you access the strongest movements you've got in Assassin's Creed, and their variations are side eject during a wall run, back eject during a wall run, side eject from hang, and back eject from hang. Given that this move gains height and that you can do it from the apex of your upward wall run, the best times to back eject are when there's an obstacle behind and just above the peak of something you're running up. So for example, instead of running up the actual building wall, you can run up this decorative part and back eject onto an object behind you. The same rules apply to good side ejects. Anything that's just a little bit above you or on the same height as you can be ejected to gain height. You can run up the actual facade, then side eject onto the decorative wall here. In the Ezio trilogy, there is a special climbing move called the Climb Leap. A thief named Rosa that Ezio meets in Venice in Assassin's Creed 2 will teach our Auditore boy this technique, and he keeps it as part of his moveset for the rest of his games. A good way to think of this move is like another eject type. You have side eject and back eject, right? Well, Climb Leap is basically upward eject. The mindset behind using it is very similar to how you'd use the other two eject types. When you finally unlock Climb Leap in AC2, when you buy the Climb Leap glove from Leonardo in AC Brotherhood, or at any time in AC Revelations, you'll be able to Climb Leap. Since I called it upward eject earlier, you can imagine what the button combo for it is, right? By holding high profile, your stick or movement keys upwards, and tapping legs or the jump command, you'll jump upwards a fair distance while already hanging on a wall. In real life parkour, we call this move a dino, and while most people can't do it at Ezio distances, some folks can launch themselves pretty high. Climb Leap is a move that Ezio needs in order to progress in the story, but it also opens up extra aerial gameplay the same way the other ejects do. Here are two interesting ways I frequently use it in. The first is as an extended wall run. After Ezio runs up a wall, his vertical movement slows down considerably, and the distance you travel the rest of the way to the top will be traveled slower than the initial burst of movement that the actual wall run gives you. You can kind of extend the distance Ezio moves up any wall by timing this kind of up eject as soon as you see his Wallrun animation entering its ending frames. Its ending frames are when Ezio has put his hands on the wall and already grabbed it, so it would be here. When you see this part of the animation, eject upwards with the climb leap and hold catch ledge to finish the action. This is usable on a lot of different walls, and most of the time, you don't even have to think about it, because the climb leap move always naturally finishes with you holding catch ledge anyway. If there's something to grab onto, you will. If there isn't, all that will happen is you grabbing back onto the ledge you started from, like this. If you want to, you can just never climb anything normally again once you have this move unlocked, which is the second way I use it, or more accurately, the way I abuse it. Spamming climb leap over and over again is one of the fastest ways to climb lots of buildings in these games. It looks pretty goofy, but if you care about function over form and substance over style, you can absolutely pull this technique out of your pocket in various cases and just zip your way up to the top of buildings. You can use this to effectively no-brain certain structures that would normally make you climb around a corner in order to keep moving. If there's a ledge Ezio can eject up to, you can just do it, no problem. Looking for ledges mid-fall is another thing. Whenever you're falling through the air, preparing to hold empty hand is really useful, as we mentioned. This lets you bypass large sections of movement by flinging yourself off a lethal drop on purpose, and then catching any grabbable wall object on the way down. Remember that as long as you don't land on anything with your feet, but it's your hand that's grabbing the handhold, you will take absolutely zero damage. Imagine how useful this can be for saving your life.
Haystack. No! You gotta be f***ing kidding me. Oof!
Catch ledge can also be used to reposition or climb sideways, quicker than you could do it by staying on the building. Fling yourself to the side, then immediately hold catch ledge back in the direction of the structure. You can spam this to traverse horizontal handholds ridiculously fast. However, do not do this if there is a haystack below you in the direction you want to jump in. You will trigger a leap of faith by accident and have to climb all the way back up. This goes back to being aware of your surroundings and not doing unnecessary actions. Finally, be aware that a lot of these tips apply to the Kenway saga, so AC3, Black Flag, and Rogue, and in much more limited capacity to the games that come after them, but the mindset portions remain useful even if the buttons get changed a lot. The major differences between the Kenway games and classic AC is how sprint and catch ledge are handled. Sprint is now bound to a single button, high profile, so you'll just be letting go of that when curving around walls or otherwise preventing mishaps. Catch ledge happens just by tilting your left stick or movement keys in a direction without holding any buttons down. It's less reliable and less consistent than in Altair and Ezio's games, but you know, it's still useful. You also can't catch ledge behind yourself, just left, right, and forward, but remember it anyway. To conclude, the secret to getting good at classic AC movement is clean inputs, knowing your environment, and self-reflection. Remember not to get overly greedy and spammy with your buttons. Having good profile discipline will help you a lot. Remember that stacked cubes or stair formations are parkour starters and will help you move and climb quicker. Remember that vertical movement is accelerated by horizontal movement, especially before you get climb leap, so look out for good eject opportunities. Remember that mastery of catch ledge allows you to start doing crazy aerial moves and save your life. Finally, if you do mess up, and if you do jump in a weird direction, try to think of what you were doing a moment before that, what buttons your hands were pressing or not pressing. The next time you run into a situation like that, don't do what you just did. Keep all that in mind and your sync rate with Assassin Parkour will skyrocket. Good luck in the Animus, and stay sneaky.